Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 2 p.m. Eastern, so we will begin this meeting of the North American Numbering Council. My name is Christy Schumann. I am the designated federal officer of the NANC, and I thank you all for joining us today for our first meeting of 2022. Before we begin regular business, I'd like to introduce and welcome the new Vice Chairwoman of the NANC, Bridget Alexander White. On the NANC, Bridget represents US Connect. Many of you already know Bridget from her years of service on the NANC. She was first appointed to the NANC in 2017 and served as co-chair of the nationwide number portability working group. Currently, she serves on both the number administration oversight working group and the call authentication trust anchor working group.
Is now joining.
We are pleased that Bridget has agreed to serve as vice chairwoman of the council during this charter. Vice Chairwoman, we welcome you to this new role and we look forward to working with you. Chairwoman Charles Peterson, I now turn the meeting over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first meeting of the NANC for 2022. I'd also like to welcome our new Vice Chairwoman, Bridget Alexander White. And you just heard Christy welcome her as well. We're just so happy to have her with us to her new role on the NANC. Bridget has served on the NANC and its working group since 2017, and she was selected as Vice Chairwoman for this charter in recognition of her many contributions to the work of the NANC over that time. Bridget, welcome. Would you like to make any remarks this afternoon?
Yes, I would, and thank you, Chairwoman Charles Peterson, for the introduction and the time to say a few words. I appreciate it very much. It has actually been my pleasure to serve on the NANC as a representative for the rural carriers. I actually enjoy the work that I do a lot, and the people that I work with are amazing. They're not only nice people, but they're very intelligent. So I have to say I learn something every time we have a call together. And I was especially honored to be appointed as Vice Chairwoman of the NANC by our FCC Chairwoman, Rosen Worzel. That is a great honor for me. So thank you, Chairwoman. And I look forward to continuing my service on the NANC and being a positive addition to the NANC leadership. So I thank you all again for this honor.
Thanks, Bridget. I look forward to working with you in your new role. Now we welcome members of the public watching via live stream and encourage you to submit any questions to livequestions@fcc.gov. Your questions will be read during the public participation portion of the meeting. Before we begin, I will review for council members some ground rules and best practices to ensure we have a smooth and successful meeting. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. You may use the video function, but it is not required. If you have a question or would like to make a comment during designated discussion times, please use the raise hand feature. Both Christy and I will monitor this. Everyone manages their own raise hand feature, so please unclick once no longer needed. When you are speaking, please identify yourself, as we may not recognize your voice. And please remember to use mute when you are finished speaking. Does anyone have any questions before we proceed? I am now pleased, so pleased, to welcome our Chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel of the FCC, to make opening remarks. Chairwoman Rosenworcel, welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Karen Charles Peterson and Vice Chairwoman Bridget Alexander White, and of course, all the members of the NANC, and a big welcome to everyone who is watching this meeting online, and that includes my colleague, Commissioner Symington. I'm glad he's joined us here today, too. Now, this is my first opportunity to personally welcome the new NANC Chairwoman and Vice Chairwoman, and I want to thank you both for your service to the Council. I know that the NANC is under good hands with your leadership. And this is also my first opportunity to address the NANC after its rechartering. So a big thank you to the many council members who have returned to serve once again on the council. You absolutely know what you're getting into. I also want to welcome the new members who have joined the NANC for this charter and thank them for their willingness to serve on this long-standing federal advisory committee. And it really is long-standing because the NANC has provided technical numbering expertise to the FCC for over 25 years. You know, while the use of telephone numbers has changed over that time, one thing really remains the same. Numbering resources are an essential way we stay connected. And as this pandemic has demonstrated, staying connected has never been more important. And it's vital that we can all trust the systems that help uphold our communications networks. You play an important role in that. And with that in mind, today the council is going to hear a report and vote on a recommendation concerning best practices for terminating voice service providers using caller ID authentication information. Now, of course, I don't even have to say it. All of us detest spam calls, so we're going to clap for your work to help implement STI-GA, which, as you know, is the caller ID authentication technology that can help reduce spoofing and illegal calling. And I'm also pleased you're going to be tackling another important issue. The FCC, along with state regulatory commissions and a whole bunch of other stakeholders, is concerned about the exhaust of numbering resources. And in that regard, I really want to thank Nancy in advance for its work on the report that the Wireline Competition Bureau recently requested concerning trials of individual telephone number pooling. Your expertise regarding numbering administration on this issue is just so important. I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm really hopeful that the upcoming report will be helpful to the FCC's efforts to consider proposals for individual telephone numbering pooling trials. So I don't want to take more time away from you today and all the hard work you're going to do. Just let you know that I really appreciate your efforts. I appreciate your public service being a part of this council. And if there's anything that the FCC or my office can do to support you, please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rosenworcel. We appreciate you taking time to join us today, and I thank you for your kind words. We are also honored to have another member of the commission with us today, and that is Commissioner Symington, who has joined us for this meeting today, and we want to welcome him to our proceedings. We are always privileged to have commissioners who are engaged on these issues of critical importance to the nation's communications. Welcome, Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, delighted to be invited, and honored to be a part of this important proceeding.
Thank you, Commissioner Symington. And now, it is my pleasure to serve as chairwoman of this important advisory committee, and I look forward to working with you and your staff and the dedicated members of the NANC on the Commission's policy priorities. I'll turn the meeting back over to DFO Christy Schumann, who will conduct the roll call. If the members have any new ethic disclosures to make to the group, please respond when called with your name to indicate that you are present, and then make the relevant disclosure at that time.
Okay, we'll begin with 10X people.
This is Lisa Marie Maxon, present. No new disclosures.
Thank you. 800 Response Information Services.
Good afternoon. This is Heather Barrows. No disclosures.
ACA Connects.
Mike Jacobs, ACA Connects.
Is now exiting.
Ad Hoc Telecommunications Users Committee.
Hi, this is Susan Gately here, and I have no disclosures.
Okay. ADIS, Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions.
Jackie Balchma.
AT&T.
Allow reference for AT&T and no disclosures.
Bandwidth,
LJ Freeman, I have no disclosures. Greg Rogers will not be joining today.
okay, thank you. Charter Communications, Comcast Corporation,
Beth Rose is present for Comcast.
Competitive Carriers Association,
Hi, it's Alexi Maltas for CCA.
CTIA, the Wireless Association,
Hello, this is Sarah Leggin for CTIA. Thank you.
District of Columbia Public Service Commission,
Laura Walt with the DC Public Service Commission, no disclosures.
Google, Encompass,
Hey, good afternoon. This is Chris Shipley with Encompass.
Intelliquent,
This is Brian Bethane with Intelliquent, no disclosures.
Intrado,
Bob Acosta with Entrado. I have no disclosures.
Lumen,
This is Philip Lindsay with Lumen.
Maine Public Utilities Commission,
Phil Bartlett, no disclosures.
Nasuka,
This is Bob Nelson with Nasuka, no disclosures.
Nevada Public Utilities Commission,
This is Tammy Cordova from the Nevada Public Utilities Commission, no disclosures.
NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association,
This is Brian Ford with NTCA, and I have no disclosures.
Peerless Network,
Hi, this is Julie Ost with Peerless Network. No disclosures.
SIP Forum,
This is Rich Shockey of the SIP Forum. No disclosures.
T-Mobile, TDS Telecommunications,
This is Paul Nagedlo with TDS, no disclosures.
Telex,
Stacy Carmel is here with Teleax, no disclosures.
Telnix,
David Cason with Telnix, no disclosures.
Twilio,
Rebecca Thompson for Twilio, and no new disclosures.
US Telecom,
Josh Berkey for US Telecom, no disclosures.
Verizon,
Dana Crandall here, no disclosures.
Vonage,
Colin Brown here, no disclosures.
iConnective,
Chris Drake, no disclosures, and our alternate is also present.
Kathy
Hi.
McMahon,
Yes, this is Kathy McMahon, no disclosures.
Somos,
Joel Bernstein for Somos, no disclosures.
okay, thank you, everyone. Did I miss anyone or did anyone join late?
This is Glenn Klepper with Charter. I'm our alternate and no disclosures.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that concludes the roll call. I'll turn the meeting back to the chair.
Thanks, Christy. Now we'll hear from Brent Struthers, Director of the Governance Authority. Brent, the meeting is yours, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Chairwoman Charles Peterson, Vice Chair Alexander White. Pleased to be here on behalf of the GA and ADIS today to present. The first slide is really just a filler, so if you could go to the second slide, please, we'll get into the report. Thank you. You can see that last year was a year of tremendous growth for the STI-GA and the Shaken framework. We went from 74 to 408 providers by the end of the year. We are now at roughly 422 to start off the first month in the new year. We still have 10 secure 10 STI certification authorities. 8 of those are public, meaning 2 of them serve their own needs only. So we have 10 of those, 8 serving the public, and we have 3 more certification authority applications pending. So we're still in a growth mode. We expect more growth this year, and yeah, that's good news. Can we go to the next slide, please? So it's the bulk of the report. We have a 2021 year-end shaken report. Done that every year so far. So talks about what happened in 2021, talks about the growth. It talks about the various policies the board added to address issues like optional use of delegate certificates, access for RESPORCs to SBC tokens so that they may assign delegate certificates to their users so that they can more easily have toll-free traffic attested to, properly attested to. There's the link. It's kind of long, but if you need access to that, you can contact me after the meeting. I can show you where it is. It's up on the STI-GA website. It's up on the very front page, so it shouldn't be too terribly hard to find. But that's the link to the report. Feel free to go read it. Again, if you have questions about it, feel free to ask me anytime. And service changes. iConnect recently implemented a multi-region disaster recovery process. You may have noticed if your company does any business with Amazon Web Services, they had a couple outages on the East Coast last year, or a few outages on the East Coast last year. This seems to have become more common. iConnect, the STI-PA, spent the better part of a year planning a multi-region disaster recovery process so that we would be able to fall back to a second region should the East region of Amazon Web Services, on which sits the STI-PA primary service, goes down. So we now have that in place. So outages should be a lot less common, less impacting based on Amazon Web Service outages of any kind. So I think we're in better shape there. iConnect also at the request of the GA board created a service provider contact list, primarily used for if you have issues with a certificate that one of the authorized service providers is using to sign their calls. You can use that contact list on the STI-PA portal to find the name of the company and get a contact at that company to work with them to resolve those certificate issues. So that was put up late in the year. And on the STI-GA framework funding, we're still getting the numbers coming in for 2022. We expect to be fully funded this year as we were last. A little bit of good news with the contribution factor. So for 2021, this was the contribution factor 0.000181. 2022, you'll see that it was lowered to 0.000053. It's 71% lower than it was in 2021 for 2022. So payments are down for everybody pretty much this year because we had a much greater number of providers participating. That always allows the cost to be spread out more broadly, and it lowers everybody's individual costs. So if there's any questions on that, always feel free to reach out to me. But obviously, with more providers joining in 2022, I'd expect that funding factor to probably go down again next year. All right, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is our focus this year. Obviously, we're continuing to focus on making sure the framework is fully funded. We're trying to make best use of the funds we have. We're not a profit-making group. We are just trying to pay for the cost of the framework, and we're keeping that framework up to date with industry needs by making whatever changes we need to make. Stir Shaken is an evolving standard, and we will need to keep up with that. And we may need to make changes. So cross-border call signing is one of those changes. We expect that there may be agreement between Canada, the CSTGA, the Canadian Governance Authority, and the STI-GA, the U.S. Governance Authority, at some point this year to discuss whatever unique issues are caused by cross-border call signing. That's signing of calls that are signing of calls that may originate in Canada and terminate in the U.S. or vice versa. We want to be able to make sure that calls can be attested to and that attestation is accepted on the other side of the border, whichever side it is. So that's what I've got for the report today. Any questions? Okay, if no questions, Chairwoman, I will hand it back to you, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you,
Brent, can you hear me? This is Bob Costa. I actually do have a question. May I proceed?
Please.
Brett, it's my understanding that the STI-GA is considering a new policy that would require all eligible providers to obtain and use their own tokens as a general rule. Is that still under consideration? And if so, what is the status of that dialogue?
You're correct. The board's actually been talking about something like that for the better part of a year. We are still in discussions on that, but that's about all I can say on it right now. I don't think there's any kind of a policy that's imminent, but the board's been discussing that quite a long time.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all.
Are there any other questions or comments for Brent before we move on? Hearing none, again, thank you, Brent, for your report. Next, we'll hear from Teresa Patton, co-chair of the North American Portability Management, LLC. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As one of the co-chairs of the NAPM LLC, it is my pleasure to update the group on our activities since the last NANC meeting. No new statements of work have been received, and just this past weekend, the Impact Release 5.4 was successfully implemented, and it included operations and usability enhancements. We also wanted to highlight just some of the 2021 accomplishments by the LNPA. They exceeded 99.99% service availability and completed all audit and compliance exercises on time and with 0 deficiencies. They also supported a 35% increase in porting transactions and a 30% increase in pool block requests. And finally, implemented 6 new change orders and updated 22 industry specification documents. Officer elections were held during the NAPM LLC's annual meeting, and Deb Tucker with Verizon was elected as co-chair, replacing Tim Cagle, who retired from Comcast, and Randy Ryan was elected as secretary, replacing Laura Dalton, who was unable to continue in the role. The Contract Implementation Committee had 3 new PTRS finding reports since the last NANC meeting, and the annual certification qualification for both service providers and PTRS users for 2022 has been kicked off. iConnected will now have an online certification process through their customer portal for users to submit their ACQ. Next slide, please. The Security Advisory Committee, along with members from the FCC, participated in secure virtual tours of both data centers, and members of the SAC and the FCC also participated in a cybersecurity review that was facilitated by iConnected. A new NAPM LLC Advisory Committee, called the TNAC, or the Numbering Trends Advisory Committee, was recently created and has been asked to identify, research, and discuss industry trends and developments that relate to number management and, by association, number porting. That would be the end of my report. Any questions? Thank you.
I have a question. I have my hand raised. This is Joel Bernstein from Somos. I'm sorry, waiting for recognition from the chair before I speak.
Apologies, didn't see the hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. I actually have a couple questions about the new advisory committee. Is that something that's just open to NAPM LLC members or for all impact users or the public?
It is limited just to NAPM LLC members.
Okay. And what is sort of the ultimate purpose of the group? Are you going to make a recommendation to the FCC or to Nancy?
It's more to make recommendations to potentially the LNPA as far as improvements to the impact. It's to discuss what the future of the impact might look like. But anything that we came up with would have to come through the Nancy.
Okay, thank you. It seems like this would be something maybe the Nancy would want to take up, and I appreciate that. And I thank you for the chair's indulgence and the council's indulgence.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Teresa, for your report. Next, we'll hear from Phil Lindsay and Bob McCausland, co-chairs of the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. Phil and Bob, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman Charles Peterson. Thank you for the opportunity to provide a readout on our activities since our last meeting. My name is Phil Lindsay. I'm with Lumen. I share the chair role with Bob McCausland with Intrado. We also have two liaisons, Bill Anderley and Rebecca Macaroni, who have been invaluable assets to our work in overseeing these contracts. So appreciate that. We can move to the next slide. Oh, one thing before we get started, prior to my beginning this, I appear to have some bandwidth issues. And so Chairwoman Charles Peterson, if I appear to be unintelligible, please let me know and we can maybe have Bob take over for me if it becomes a problem.
We will let you know. Thank you for that, for giving us the heads up.
And
Thank
I
you.
am standing by to help if necessary, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. And I apologize for putting you on the spot here. So anyway, so our area of responsibility, our mission is to oversee the contracts associated with the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, the NAMPA, and that includes also the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator, and then a second contract of the Billing and Collections Agent. The North American Numbering Plan Administrator administers the numbering associated with the North American Numbering Plan, pooling, and as well as PNE numbering resources. The Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator administers the Reassigned Numbers Database, and the information that's uploaded into that database, as well as those users that query that database. And then the Billing and Collections Agent is the entity that administers the collection of the funding associated with the NAMPA contract, as well as the Billing and Collections contract. It also administers the Reassigned Numbers Database funding as well. Lastly is the oversight of the number portability, and that effort is generally focused on the working group's efforts and any information or any activities that may need the attention of the NANC. They would bring that through the NAOWG. So with that, we can move to the next slide. So our contract status with the two contracts are the NAMPA R&DA contract is with Somos Gov Inc., and it is a 5-year contract with an expiration date of November 30th, 2025. The billing agent with Welch LLP, it's a 5-year contract with the current expiration of April 30th of 2023. Our contract oversight activity, as you can see, this is just kind of a summary of that information. We generally have monthly meetings with deliverables, just overall oversight of the activity. And these items here are all, the elements that we have on our agendas for each of our monthly meetings. I'll go through in more detail each of these on the subsequent slides, so we can move into those if you'd like. With the NAMPA, we review monthly reports, and that includes the NAMP, North American Numbering Plan reports, the pooling administration reports, and the RNA reports associated with PNE type resources. We complete a NAMPA monthly quarterly evaluation that has to do with basically the checklist of the fundamental elements in the contract. We also have a effort that is part of the most recent contract that would include combining the number administration systems associated with central office code administration, as well as pooling administrative systems in the RNA system. That is anticipated to complete around the first quarter of 2023. And then in addition to that, pursuant to the contract, we are in the process of developing the survey that is an annual survey that allows for user feedback. Some of these types of user feedback would be from service providers or regulators that may have access to those systems. This is also considered in our annual evaluation and is currently under FCC legal review. The next slide, we have the 988 implementation planning pursuant to the implementation of 988 as a national suicide hotline, with some of the details identified here in this first item associated with the order from the FCC that would designate that or establish that. NAMPA is essentially project managing the transition from 7 to 10 digits in those areas where 988 is used as a NXX associated and has 7-digit dialing. Those areas need to move to 10-digit in order to avoid conflicts associated with the dialing of those 3 digits of 988. The planning meetings are I have identified here on October, November, and December since our last NANC meeting. The most significant date that we've come to since then has been the 10-digit dialing effective date, which would allow for providers to require mandatory 10-digit dialing, and that is a period between October 24th and July 16th of 2022. All of those transitions will be or planned to be made by July 16th of 2022, effectively establishing 988 as the nationwide suicide hotline. The additional information can be found at the URL I provided there. And then once we get to July 16th, unless there's any other issues that come up that we need to oversee associated with 988 implementation, we will conclude our status reporting of this effort. Our next slide. The RNDA. So the reassigned numbers database administration. We have a similar report, monthly report. We completed our RNDA monthly and quarterly evaluation similar to the NAMPA, and service provided data upload is required by the 15th of each month. And as of the last report, we were noting here a little statistic around almost 172 million numbers have been uploaded into the database, including toll-free numbers. Small service provider data is to be uploaded by the 15th of each month, and that began in October 15th of 2021. That was the final stage of providers uploading data into the RND. At that point, all providers on a monthly basis will be uploading their disconnected data and on a going forward basis. So essentially that October 15th is the start date where all providers are essentially uploading disconnected data into that database. And then I've got a citation here for folks that are interested in learning more about the R&D. I have the RNDA website as well as the FCC reference on there for their website. Next, billing and collections. We reviewed the billing collections reports, and that's another monthly report. Since our last meeting, we did receive an annual operations review. We continued the monthly review of deliverables, the NAMPA financials and R&D financials, as well as completed all the monthly and quarterly evaluations. So nothing extraordinarily different associated with our efforts there for this since our last meeting. To the next. All right, number portability industry forum. This is more informational, giving folks an idea of kind of the scope of that work that's being done. We have not had any items come from the number portability industry forum to be brought into the NANC, but we will make sure that we keep the NANC updated on anything that may need to be presented to the NANC through this process. We've identified some meeting notices as far as the schedule. I believe that's an open forum to the industry. And then I've got contact information associated with the chairs of that group. The next slide. So our number administration oversight working group, this is a list of the membership of that working group. Just to give you an idea of kind of the scope of the expertise that we have in this, and it's a very talented and knowledgeable group, and I extend my appreciation to every single one of them. Everybody it's a very involved group. There are very few people that don't contribute, if any. In fact, I don't know of any that don't. So I want to extend my thank you to everybody that attends this meeting and contributes. With that, this is the schedule for our monthly meetings for the duration of 2022. It's subject to change. We do have flexibility, and sometimes we do change those meetings, but otherwise, this is generally our calendar for the year. And if you have any need to contact myself or my co-chair, Bob Coslin, got our email addresses here for your reference. And I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any.
And Phil, your audio was good, and it may be appropriate, Phil and Madam DFO and Madam Chair, for us to mention the charge letter that was issued by the Commission today, seeking or directing the NANC to provide recommendations by the 15th of August on individual telephone number porting, which Phil and I will begin to develop a work plan around and be in touch with NAOWG members over.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, and that's absolutely, we look forward to beginning the work on that.
Well, thank you, Phil and Bob, and we look forward to all of the great work that you will be doing on that plan. Any questions or comments?
I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you, Christy. We appreciate the update and all of the good work of the NAOWG. Now we will hear a report and recommendation from the Call Authentication Trust Working Group on best practices for terminating voice service providers using caller ID authentication information. The co-chairs of the working group are Jackie Walgenbuff and Beth Shurase, whom I thank for their leadership. I believe Beth will be presenting the report on behalf of the working group. So I'll turn the meeting over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Chairwoman Charles Peterson. We'd like to thank the Bureau for the opportunity to work on these important issues. And we can move right on to the next slide. So this is the second of the 3 charges that the CATA Working Group has been given by the Wireline Competition Bureau in its June 15th, 2021 charge letter. And the charge reads as follows: report no later than February 15th, 2022, a set of best practices relating to how terminating voice providers can best protect their subscribers using caller ID authentication information. The report was to address the following items: identify and explain how STIR-shaken information is being or has been used by voice providers and others to combat illegal robocalls, and recommend a set of best practices for terminating providers to reference regarding both use of STIR-shaken and for protecting subscribers who fall outside of the STIR-shaken framework, including but not limited to the following: means by which terminating providers can use STIR/SHAKEN caller ID information, including calls they receive, to best protect their subscribers. Techniques that do not rely on STIR/SHAKEN caller ID authentication information that terminating providers can use to protect consumers. And whether, and if so, how, STIR/SHAKEN caller ID authentication information should be shared with call recipients, and if STIR/SHAKEN caller ID authentication information should be shared with call recipients, recommend whether this practice should be standardized. And we can move on to the next slide. So some background on our best practices. The focus was on actions that can be taken by terminating voice providers to protect their customers. The group recognized the importance of continued vigilance on the originating provider end of calls, including vetting, but this report did focus on actions taken by terminating voice providers specifically. The best practice recognized that terminating voice providers leveraging multiple techniques to detect and stop illegal robocalls are best able to protect their consumers and improve the customer experience. So this is in line with the no silver bullets adage that we always hear when we're talking about robocall mitigation techniques. It recognizes the importance of STIR/SHAKEN for restoring trust in the network and the need for more ubiquitous implementation of STIR/SHAKEN. For example, possibly the filtering of calls that are lacking an A attestation at some point in the future, not tomorrow, certainly. SHAKEN verification can also provide inputs for analytics. For example, the absence or presence of a signature or other information in the elements of the signature can be used. And we recognize that non-STIR/SHAKEN techniques for combating illegal robocalls are also of great importance and recognize the potential impact on emergency telecommunications services, including the framework for signing 911 calls. And we can go on to the next slide. So we divided our best practices into two subcategories based on what can be implemented now and what requires more ubiquitous implementation of STIR/SHAKEN in the future. So in terms of best practices for terminating service providers that can be implemented in the near term, we have display to the subscriber, a STIR/SHAKEN verification indicator for calls with attestation level A, employ or make available to the subscriber complementary analytics to identify calls highly likely to be illegal or unwanted, display call labels to subscribers, or employ diversion techniques that enable redirection of calls to alternate destinations such as voicemail, offer to subscribers call treatment options such as block lists, anonymous call rejection, or do not disturb, and block calls that are highly likely to be illegal before they reach subscriber premises equipment. For example, calls from invalid codes, unallocated or unassigned numbers, and calls that are on the do not originate list. If we could go to the next slide. And then again, we recognized that certain best practices might be implementable in the future when there's more ubiquitous implementation of STIR/SHAKEN. So we labeled these as longer-term potential best practices. And those would be using analytics algorithms to identify patterns of information found in SHAKEN passports. For example, attestation and origination identifier assignments that could provide better accuracy for reputational scores, noting that reputational scores can apply at the individual user level, as well as at the service provider level. And a second longer-term potential best practice was for calls signed with a resource priority header passport to use the RPH field for call validation treatment when terminating calls to a PSAP or terminating callbacks from PSAPs. We can move on to the next slide. So there was one particular subtopic we did not tackle because of the complexity of the topic, and that is considerations for enterprises. The group recognized that enterprise customers may benefit from more information than simple shaken verification results, and that enterprises may want to perform their own analytics to verify calling party identities, and that the universe of enterprises is diverse, complicating recommendations on that topic. And before developing terminating service provider best practices for calls destined to enterprises, additional study is needed, whether to transmit the entire SIP identity headers, the current technical capabilities of enterprises, potential security issues, and sufficiency of commercial agreements between enterprises and service providers. So we recommend that the FCC consider a referral to the CATR working group for further study on this topic. We can move on to the next slide. This is just some logistics on the group meetings. We met over the 5 past months, quite a few meetings. We can move on to the next slide. And this is the membership of our working group.
Is now exiting.
I'd like to thank the entire working group. We have just a really engaged, intelligent set of members, and everybody has just been great in terms of their contributions, both written contributions and discussion. And we can move on to the final slide. Just like to also thank our liaisons, Michael and Alex, and my co-chair, Jackie, who just does an incredible amount of the work to keep this group organized. So we will now take any questions.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, we'll give it another second or two to see if there are any recommendations, any questions or comments, rather, before we vote. Okay, not seeing any questions or comments. Thank you, everyone. The discussion period is now over and complete. I will now open the meeting up for a vote to approve the CATA Working Group's report and recommendation. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
This is Bob McCausland at Entrado Communications. I will move to approve.
This is Rich Shockey. I second that.
Great. Thank you, Bob McCausland, for moving it. And Rick Shockey, thank you for your second. We'll submit to the council for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Any nays? All right, then Nancy approves the report and recommendation of the Call Authentication Trust Anchor Working Group. Thank you so much for this report. We really appreciate it. We will now move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. As I noted earlier, we enable public participation through comments filed in the docket and through a dedicated email address, livequestions@fcc.gov. First, we'll turn to comments filed in the docket.
We do not have any questions submitted in the docket.
Thank you very much, Christy. A public notice for this meeting released on December 15th and asked members of the public to file any comments in the Commission's electronic comment filing system. Hearing and seeing that we have no comments, we'll just continue moving forward. Are there any public comments or questions received through the live question government email address?
No, we do not have any questions from the live questions mailbox.
Okay, So we are going to wrap things up quite early this afternoon, everyone. Lastly, well, not lastly, but I do want to just welcome my co-chair, my vice chair to the Nancy. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today and going forward for the rest of the charter. You will find that this is and you've been part of the Nancy in the past, so you know that this is an exciting and fabulous council. So we are just really looking forward to all of the great work that we have ahead of us for this charter. And then lastly, do any Nancy members have other business they wish to address this afternoon?
No hands are raised.
Okay, perfect. So just as a reminder, the next Nancy meeting will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on June 14th, 2022. And it will be an all virtual format again. Please mark your calendars as we get closer to the date. The agenda, presentation slides, and login information will be distributed. Christy, anything from the commission you'd like to add?
Nothing else from the FCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Bridget, anything you'd like to conclude with?
Thank you again for your kind words. I very much appreciate them and the welcome. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. If there is nothing else, I thank you all for your time. Please stay safe. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.